It allows emergent bilingual funding to be used to fund salaries. It also ensures districts have the flexibility to provide teacher pay raises that can be sustained long-term. Members, this is a response to some very, very small districts who are receiving such a significant amount of new funding that we wanted the districts to have more local control, because as written, some of the pay raises might not have fit in with their markets or their abilities to sustain them. This amendment makes certain that school counselors and librarians and nurses also receive a pay raise since they provide essential support to all of our students. And finally, members, the amendment excludes the school safety allotment and regional insurance provision from being included in calculation for teacher pay raises. Make sure these stand alone. And I'm happy to take questions at this time.
Okay.
What the amendment does is cap the families who can benefit from the legislation at or below 85% of state median income.
So
it's a hard cap.
So you're basically saying, hey, we are prioritizing with no way to slip through the cracks. We are prioritizing low-income families that right now can't access private education.
We are prioritizing in this amendment to those families that need it the most.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Texas House approved a bill that would create a $1 billion school voucher program, and it's being met with fierce opposition. This is the KHOU report, and joining me today to talk about it is the American Federation of Teachers Union Texas Chapter President, Zev Capo. Welcome.
Thank you for having me here, Nicole. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. And as I said, the Texas House gave the green light to a bill that would create a $1 billion private school voucher program. And it's something that Governor Abbott has been pushing for years and had typically been blocked in the House. First of all, I just want to get your reaction to what happened on Thursday.
Well, after several hours of debate, some of our representatives doing a yeoman's job of trying to speak truth to power. Unfortunately, the oligarchs won, and in the Texas House voted to send Senate Bill 2 back to the Senate with some changes, but in effect approving a $1 billion tax break giveaway primarily for the wealthy who send their kids to private schools already.
So yes, so the plan would create a voucher, let's say $10,000, I believe, per family to put towards private school education. And I remember when this was being battled out in the legislature, and some were arguing, even Republicans in rural districts were arguing that, number one, my constituents still can't afford that, even with the $10,000 voucher. And there are no private schools in our area anyway. And that got me to wondering who is actually benefiting from this voucher program, and who do you believe might still be left behind?
So I think if this plays out the way it has played out in other states, the individuals that are primarily going to benefit from this are families that are wealthy enough to already send their kids to private school. Those are the individuals that are going to benefit from this $1 billion tax giveaway. The fundamentals have not changed in most rural districts, particularly several of the districts who were strong-armed by the governor. There still aren't private school options that are even available for families to be able to utilize. In many of our suburban and urban school districts, the tuition is 2 to 3 times more than what they're offering in a voucher. So this ultimately is going to be a break for those that can already afford to pay the additional funding for private school. And there's another group of individuals that are going to make a lot of money off of this. And we don't talk about that enough, but we should. And that's the vendors. The same people that make a lot of money off of public schools, the same people that make a lot of money off of charter schools. Whoever the friendly vendor is that ultimately gets awarded the contract will probably make at least, $80 million over this, even $80 million a year over the 2-year biennium. When you look at the cost factor that's built in just to administer the program. So families in Texas are not the real winners because private schools still are the ones that make the choice about who can attend and who can't, regardless of the voucher. Families who can't afford to pay the additional tuition will not necessarily have that choice. But ultimately, who is going to win are whoever is cashing that $80 million a year check to run this program, and the people that they're providing kickbacks to.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because in this whole debate, that's what I was wondering, is who's going to be administering these programs? What is their stake in it? And because they're going to make a lot of money, and that is something that is left out of I shouldn't say left out, but it, as you said, it doesn't get talked about enough. But that's very important in terms of what their goal is. What is the goal of this? Is it to better educate Texas citizens or to enrich a few?
That's absolutely right. As a matter of fact, we already have a tangled web between the Texas Education Agency that is headed by an appointee of Governor Abbott. During COVID, they actually launched a voucher light program that was ostensibly focused for special needs families and students. That we've already seen through open records requests that there is a significant amount of questionable use of that funding, but it was administered by a group called Class Wallet, and we expect Class Wallet to apply for this contract as well. So I think that program more about a test balloon to see how this is going to work and how they can move things forward. But if it's not Class Wallet, it will certainly be somebody else who is cashing in on our tax dollars.
Republicans had said that the bill would prioritize low-income children and students with disabilities, but during the arguments, the debate over the bill, some Democrats had pointed out that the bill did not impose any admission requirements for these private schools to do what Republicans had said that they would assure would be done. Can you talk about how not having those requirements impacts those students?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, public schools are very highly regulated. Frankly, that's probably where so much of the finger pointing comes from. We are a very pluralistic and diverse society. We all have different values and different sets, of things to look at. But private schools are going to have a very narrow group of stakeholders that are making all of the decisions, with no real space for moms and dads, no real space for families that may not be directly attached to or part of a church unit that's running these schools or some other entity, if it's a secular private school, to have a say in what happens in curriculum, what happens with their students' day-to-day work, what happens with their accreditation, what happens with their with their preparation for college and career, if they don't set or don't have a set of standards that we all have come to expect or expect to be the norms for most of our schooling. They're not required to do any of that. They are, under this bill, required to take some type of norm reference test, which may or may not actually be one of the indicators to decide whether these schools will take voucher students in the first place. There is no set requirement for curriculum or disciplinary issues. Their curriculum doesn't necessarily have to be factually based. It doesn't necessarily have to be scientifically based, which could be a real hindrance for those that are focused on college and career readiness. I taught in a private school, so I know this firsthand. I know the type of curriculum that is often utilized or required of the teachers to present. It's one of the reasons that I left teaching private school, because my value system simply did not allow me to continue teaching something that I know was not factually true. So there are a lot of concerns that I think that are going to come up in the implementation of this process that will potentially change people's outlook. Even those that I think supported this voucher program may have buyer's remorse as this rolls out.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about that too, and listening to the arguments and just reading more about it in terms of uh, who can, what types of curriculums can be considered, given the green light to teach students under this program, and then how ready are they to join society after that? Like you said, college, and if they want to go even further than that, is that something that do you think has been missed in this conversation in terms of, okay, this is past, but are our kids going to be educated enough to be able to compete?
So I think that has been, I think it may have publicly been missed, but I think it's at the heart of why so many people want these private school vouchers. The reason has not changed since Brown versus Board of Education was passed in this country. The very first fight and voucher argument was in 1957 in the state of Texas, in order to allow white families and parents to have a voucher system to go to private schools that could pick and choose the students that they allowed into the school. And I think that there is a real concern that our pluralistic society will be even further segregated through this process. If you have individuals that are going based on a particular denomination of religion, or going based on a particular set of values where they attract individuals that may look and think alike, then how are those students going to be prepared to deal with the real world, where they have to, frankly, interact with the rest of us when they get out of school, where they have to actually be prepared to compete on the same level that has a standard that says, 2 + 2 actually is 4, not 3. And I may be sounding a bit glib about that, but each of these individual institutions can pick and choose what they decide to teach or what they choose not to teach. And there's really nothing that those of us that are taxpayers providing the money for these vouchers can do about it.
I want to get into the other kind of spending bill that was passed. They're saying that they're putting more money into public education, and I had read somewhere that this current bills, the allotment would be raised by about $395. Is that enough? And if not, how much is actually needed? Because that's one of the other arguments that I've heard throughout this school voucher program debate, is that we know that public schools are already woefully underfunded and there needs to be more money. So then there's saying, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll add more money to education. But some are arguing that that doesn't even scratch the surface. Can you kind of expand on that?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, $395 is the increase to the basic allotment for each student in the public school system. And, while it is something, it is not anywhere near close to the number that is needed to get us back to inflationary adjusted rates of funding that we had in 2019. To get back to 2019 buying power for our schools, you would need about $1,380 per student increase in the basic allotment. So we're about $1,000 short per student of what is actually needed to kind of bring things up to even. That's how far behind we are in the public school system. And this voucher bill that was passed, just the $1 billion today, not the $4 billion that it's expected to balloon to in a few years. This $1 billion that they passed per year could have basically covered another $100 per student increase for the 5.5 million Texas students, as opposed to providing $10,000 for about 100,000 unique and special families across the state. This is the problem, because public schools were designed to be a public good for the whole of society. And when you look at the ratios of what we're going to be spending on 100,000 students versus what we're willing to spend on 5.5 million, it's heartbreaking. The state itself, if we talk about state money and not necessarily what local property taxes are putting into it, The state itself right now only spends about $6,100 per student in the basic allotment, yet they're planning to give almost $11,000 to each of these voucher families. And I think that that's a real concern when you look at what the responsibilities under the Texas Constitution are to meet the needs of Texas families in the public school system. And this, frankly, Nicole, doesn't even get into the question of the disparities between public schools and charter schools. In this same bill, they massively increased the charter school facility funding. It's atrocious when you compare to what they provide for public schools. But most people don't realize that charter schools were already getting close to $1,000 per student additional in basic allotment money because of the way that they are funded vis-a-vis public schools. That was supposed to or intended to make up for the fact that they didn't receive local property tax dollars in funding. Well, when they get this additional charter school facilities money, they won't need that $1,000 per student that they were using to pay the rent, because it just happens to come out to a classroom of 20 students about meets the average for commercial rent space for the average American classroom. They can now transfer that money to making up for the shortfall that we just talked about in funding from 2019, which is about $1,000. So when we talk about the policies that the state makes, there is nothing about the difference between private schools, public schools, and charter schools that have anything to do with competition. These policies are about the state legislature making active, conscious choices to pick winners and to pick losers.
And that goes into, I'm glad that you brought that up, because we know that there is that disparity. And you had mentioned that, like, if they had used the money for the school voucher program, the $1 billion, it would have helped add on $100 per student for all the public school students in our state. So can you, and we were talking about the finances of it, what is the real world impact of that? What could that $100 have done for a student?
Well, if you like $100 per student on an average of 20 students in the classroom, that's an extra $2,000 that may very well make the difference between whether that classroom is, especially considering the cuts to our Department of Education at the federal level. That $2,000 may make the difference between whether classrooms have pen, paper, materials, whether they have print-rich materials to be able to teach kids. That $2,000 could be the additional burden that teachers are having to pick up or not pick up, because we know that teachers spend about $1,000 out of their own pocket for their classrooms every single year. It just further adds weight to the already strained shoulders of our public school teachers and school systems. $100, every $100 per student certainly could go a long way to making sure that the light bill gets paid, that there's somebody who can clean up the rooms each day and put gas in the buses to get kids to and from school.
As the bill goes to the Senate, what are some amendments that advocates believe need to be made to this program to make it better for more people?
Yeah. So there were some really good amendments that the House attempted to put on. For example, there was an amendment to completely cap the amount of money that was going to be spent at $1 billion per year. And that failed. There were amendments to tighten and strengthen the focus on lower income students that were going to use this, or to make sure that really high income individuals were not qualifying for the voucher. Those amendments failed. There's an entire list of things that were put forward that could have made this at least an easier pill to swallow But frankly, those amendments failed, and they failed along party lines. And that's another issue about this as well too. Like I've often long said that public education isn't and shouldn't be a partisan issue. But when it comes to this voucher issue, when it comes to amendments, when it comes to putting policies forward that could have helped support public schools, this thing went down on a party line basis. There were 2 Republicans that crossed over and voted against this voucher bill only. No Democrats voted for it. So this is when we talk about who actually has the best interest of public schools in mind, when we're talking about how policy is built, this voucher business was a stark lesson in where people stand. And I hope that families, when they start feeling the brunt of this, remember that when it comes to elections.
And speaking of that, I don't remember which representative it was. I believe he may have been out of Houston, but someone had wanted to put this up to the voters, and that failed. If this had gone to the voters, how do you think, which way do you think this would have gone?
So that was probably one of the most important amendments and probably one of the most egregious that failed. Representative James Talrico out of the Austin area fought really hard for that amendment to let the people decide. And I think, unfortunately, because Republicans on a party line basis voted against allowing the people of Texas to make this weighty decision themselves through the ballot, that we won't actually know for sure how it would have happened. But I believe, and this is why they fought so hard against letting the people of Texas decide, I believe that it had a chance of not passing, because the truth of the matter is, when you get past their marketing, when you get past their made up statistics, the majority of Texas families support their public schools and support their neighborhood schools. And they've told us time and time again, they want this legislature to focus on teacher salaries, lower class sizes, and supporting their neighborhood school.
So now that we are at this point, where do concerned citizens, advocates, teachers, where do people go from here now that we know this is just one step closer to Abbott's desk?
So there will be a discussion in the Senate on whether to accept the changes made by the House. We've already seen Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick signal publicly that he believed that the Senate should accept those changes. If that is in fact what happens, it will go to the governor's office. I suspect that it will be signed if it gets to his office, and there will be about a year before it's implemented, because it's going to take about a year for them to pick who they're going to give the $80 million a year to in the contract to administer this program. And then that company is going to have to bill us for setting all of this up to get it ready for rollout. So the soonest that we will see these dollars being taken out of our public schools and sent out to other entities will be in the 2026 school year. Now, what happens between now and then, insofar as are there legal challenges, are there other hurdles that need to be dealt with? Time will tell.
Democrat Representative Gina Hinojosa said after the vote, quote, "This bill is everything that's wrong with politics." And a lot of Democrats argued that this vote represented big money interest over Texas citizens. And you kind of already touched on that, but I wanted to get a little bit deeper into that in terms of your thoughts. Do you think do you think she's right?
I think she's 100% right. When we kind of step back from this and kind of look at the larger, bigger picture, frankly, this is much bigger than just vouchers. This is an example of how just a handful, 3 really, really rich people from out of state, along with a couple of rich people from in-state, basically spent about $90 million in primary races across the state of Texas to take people out and punish people for voting the will of their constituents. And the threat of that, the threat of even allowing the voters to decide through a referendum was crushed by the governor and the president of the United States basically saying that they would do the same to anybody who supported an amendment to put it on the ballot or voted against this voucher bill, by taking ridiculous sums of money and these types of threats. You, in essence, had a handful of people be able to erase the votes, the positions of millions of constituents across our state. And so this wasn't just an issue about vouchers. This was a body blow to our democracy and how it should function. What we really saw very blatant in how this went down on this voucher vote was the dangers that many of us, when Citizens United was passed years ago, said could surface. We saw them starkly in this particular ad. And so the question I have is, do the people really truly actually have a voice anymore, particularly if that voice is not in line with what the richest, most well-heeled people in our country want to see? I think that that's dangerous, frankly. That is, if we put that in parlances of what we've seen in a historical perspective, I mean, you know, that's the type of government they used to have in absolute monarchist Europe and other places that led to revolutions. And I know that people may think that, well, I'm sounding a bit alarmist right now, but if we do not get a handle on what is happening with our democracy and get back to a place of one person, one vote, and you have to actually make your arguments through fact, not through fake news or social media twists, or frankly spending millions and millions and millions of dollars in one district, then we're going to have far more trouble than just what vouchers are going to do to public schools.
A stark warning. And I think we'll wrap up there. Again, thank you so much for joining me to discuss this. And I want to hear from you all. What are your thoughts about the school voucher program? What are your thoughts about public education in general? And what are your concerns? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this kind of content, news, politics, and current trends, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.